Hello and welcome to the In Publishing podcast. My name is James Evelegh and I'm the editor of In Publishing. My guest this time is Jo Allan, the Chief Executive of Newsworks, the marketing body for the UK's national news publishers. Newsworks' mission is to champion the importance of a free press and lead collaboration across the industry to support the future of the sector. Before joining Newsworks, Jo had a successful career with both clients and agencies, so has a well-rounded view of the news media industry. Jo tells us how the All Together campaign showed what news media could achieve when they worked together.
And what happened there is not only did it drive impact and action, it did it at scale and importantly, really quickly. So we were working with the agility and speed and rigour of a newsroom.
She talks about the challenge posed by youthful media buyers.
Probably one of the biggest challenges that we've got, something we're very conscious of, is the need to shift perceptions amongst younger media planners. You know, these are the ones that control the advertising pounds and that perhaps don't see us as modern or as effective or relevant. And what we need to do is a lot of work on convincing them that they should include us on their plans more often and more frequently at a scale that will benefit their clients.
And what the news industry can learn from the big tech platforms.
One thing that we hear an awful lot is about how easy they are to work with, how easy it is to plan and buy. And in comparison, the news industry isn't seen as easy as those platforms to do business with. So we need to replicate that.
Before we hear more from Jo, a quick word about our valued sponsors. We would like to thank our podcast sponsor, Air Business, a market leader in distribution and subscription management services for the publishing industry. Its end-to-end service includes subscriber acquisition and marketing strategy, worldwide distribution, digital mail and e-commerce fulfillment, and warehouse and freight logistics. For more information, visit airbusiness.com. Jo Allan, hello and welcome to the In Publishing podcast.
Afternoon, James. Thank you very much for having me along today.
Now, I believe you started your career with senior marketing roles at brands like Whitbread and Cadbury. Can you tell us, from the perspective of brands, how the marketing landscape has changed over the past 20 years or so?
Well, in terms of how the landscape's changed, I'd say massively compared to 30 years ago when I first started work. But even in the last 10 years, when I joined Cara, it was very much about TV, radio, publishing, cinema and out of home. That was the media. And if we look at the ecosystem now, it's so much more complicated. And if you add on top of that globalization and digitalization, it really is a massive change. But then in other ways, I'd almost say it hasn't changed. From a marketing point of view, it's still about consumers and brands. And so for Newsworks, it's about readers and brands. I think that's what I'd say over the last 10, 30 years ago. But going back to what you said about marketing, I have spent most of my career client side, beer and chocolate after a brief stint in financial services, and then moved to media agency side. And actually, in between, I've had a few stints of working as a consultant. So I've seen it from lots of different perspectives. And each time I move, then, there's significant change within the landscape.
And has the news media always been part of, an important part of your marketing operations with those brands?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I think back to one of the things I remember most was a graduate trainee in financial services within the marketing team. And I remember launching a fixed rate mortgage, and we finalised the rate, interest rate and everything in the morning, and then we're able to see the advert in print that evening. So I say that's about 30 years ago. So that was sort of my first memory, if you like, of working with publishing. But yeah, throughout all the brands that I've worked on, absolutely. And then obviously when I was at Cara and then Visium and Dentsu, publishing media, along with all media, has been a big part of what I've done. So really it's marketing, but in latter years, it's sort of 10 years, I'd say, it's been more specialised within the media side.
Now, I understand that you've been closely involved in developing the strap line that Newsworks currently has, because journalism matters. Can you tell us a bit more about the thinking behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it was something we developed as a team. I can't take all the glory for that. I think those three words tell our story, but they tell it really clearly and simply. And it's really important that we can tell a consistent and unified story. So I think what Journalism Matters does for us is it says what we're about and what and who we represent. And the fact that journalism matters, not just as a line with those three words, but we extend it as well to say to people, to society, and to brands.
And when you're out on the road, discussing that and putting forward the case for news brands, what kind of reaction do you get?
Yeah, I mean, the narrative is landing well. What we tend to talk about, when I came on board about a year ago, we as a team, we re-looked at our purpose as well. And that is something else that we've got real clarity on now. And we see our role as driving revenue and the reputation of the industry. And that's sort of the basis of everything we do. But when we talk about why clients and agencies should listen to us and why they should consider news media, we talk about because journalism matters and the role that they can all play in sustaining journalism by advertising within news brands.
Now, trust is obviously an important part of it, and as we all know, trust is a fragile thing, and the press isn't always perfect in this regard. What do you think news media can do more of to make sure that the issue of trust always works in its favour?
We often get asked about trust, actually, James. So I think what I'd say is that there's a backdrop of fake news and misinformation. There's a lot written and read about that, and it's our job at Newsworks to remind advertisers that the trust that news brand readers put in their news brands and the true value that comes with it. One of the things that I always say when people talk about particular titles or about news in general, I say you don't have to agree with everything that you read, but it is important that you can value and trust what you read, and also use it to challenge your own opinions. And you mentioned then about it doesn't always work. I mean, yeah, things go wrong for all of us, don't they, from time to time? And no journalist wants to get anything wrong. As you're aware, there's a lot of training that goes into people when people become journalists. There's also all the various checks and balances that are in newsrooms, codes of conduct and regulations. So, news just doesn't go out there. There are lots of checks in place. In fact, actually, what we found was that throughout the pandemic, that the readership of news really soared. And the reason for that is that people were turning to sources of information that they knew they could rely on and trust. And I think, as news brands, we understand our readers and readers understand us. And it's the relationship between the two that's key. But, to go back to your original question, it's all based on trust.
And can news media do more, or do you think it's a question of continuing to highlight codes of conduct and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we did some research in the height of the pandemic. It's something that we'd done before any of us have heard of the pandemic, but we did an update while the pandemic was going on. We called it World Without News. And what that showed us was that readers valued journalism far more since before the pandemic. So actually, I think the figure was the value of journalism had shot up about 2/3. So 2/3 of people were saying they value journalism more now since the beginning of the pandemic. And a lot of the time, what we're finding, particularly with younger readers, they may hear news stories elsewhere, but then they fact check through news brands, so to make sure that the story is true and that they can trust the information that they've read.
That's very interesting, because that was one of the key findings, wasn't it? That younger people are turning to news brands to double check, as you say, what they've read on social media.
Yeah, it comes back to that word trust again, and I guess education. Young people now are far more socially conscious than any other generation we've seen before. And they are becoming more aware of the pervasiveness of fake news and misinformation. So it's great that they're not just swallowing everything that they see and read, but they are checking it out through a variety of different trusted sources. One of our other stats is that people read up to 6 different news brands a month. So I think that just shows how real that trend is.
Now, with the younger audiences, coming to news brands increasingly, is there anything does this tell us about how publishers might target them in future? Because, attracting younger readers has been a challenge in the past.
Yes, something that we've started thinking about and looking at is media literacy through schools and universities, because I think the more that we can do to educate and inform people of the value of trusted news and the sources of news, then that is all the better for journalism. So that's something that we're going to be embarking on a lot more in 2022.
Oh, can you tell us a bit more about that, the media literacy programme?
Well, at the moment, it's just something that we're going to be looking at. We haven't really got any plans as such. As I say, that's something that we're going to be looking at in our plans for 2022. I think what to say at the moment is we're just very aware that there's a job to be done. And so that's something that we're going to be embarking on next year.
Now, in terms of brands, their ad campaigns, what can brands do more to make their ad campaigns with news media even more successful than they are now?
I think the key thing that we have found over the last year was, we did some research, actually. Perhaps I should talk about the research first. We did some research with Peter Field, who I'm sure you've heard of. He's highly respected in ad effectiveness circles. And what that showed us was that advertisers are seeing more positive and also longer term business effects if they invest in news brands. And that's because that the ads that are appearing in news brands are perceived as being more trustworthy and higher quality by the readers. And those two things, trust and quality, are two of the most important factors that lead to growth for advertisers. That was the kind of key finding that came out of that effectiveness research that Peter did for us.
I know you had your media planning awards earlier in the year. Any of the campaigns there particularly stood out as, utilising news media particularly well?
I think we saw a real mixture of brands that had made the most of the pandemic. There's other brands that obviously use humour, and there's others that just really good use of content. I think the winner was a great example from Lloyds Bank, who was focusing on crosswords, where they got one of the publishers' crosswords team to actually come up with clues for having it within their ads. But yeah, there was, we were a bit worried actually about the planning awards. Would we get as many entries? But we did. We got a similar number to previous years. But yeah, a real mixture of creativity, humour, just clever stuff, and great planning.
And the flip side, what can news media do more to deliver better ROI for their commercial partners?
I think we can collaborate better. We collaborate in a lot of ways, but there's always more that we can do together. I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but the All Together campaign that we've run as an industry for the government over the last 18 months is a great example of that, where in terms of collaboration, what would previously have been seen as competing publishers put any differences and competition to one side and genuinely worked as one team. And this was, if you think back to last Easter, when coronavirus became a thing, and the public were scared, they were worried, and we were approached by the government who wanted to get vital information out to readers to sort of reassure, to explain, to increase their understanding of what was happening. And what we did as a team, as a cross-publisher team, was deliver that vital information, but importantly, not just in a compassionate tone, but in the unique tone of voice of each of the publications. So in a tone that those publications' readers could relate to. And what happened there is not only did it drive impact and action, it did it at scale and importantly, really quickly. So we were working with the agility and speed of and rigour of a newsroom. And we really felt that no other medium could have done that, to react that quickly and to sort of keep up with the ever-changing messaging and briefs that were coming our way.
So that campaign was obviously hugely successful. What were the general key takeaways from the success of the campaign? That we can work together, or were there other things you took away from it?
Yeah, it's been a fantastic experience. I think for me, coming new into Newsworks at that time, it was an amazing challenge to start with, but then something that if I look back over the last 18 months, something I'm immensely proud of and proud to work in that industry. That first brief that we got from the government last Easter, we went from the original sort of pitch, if you like, to cover wrapping over 600 titles and homepage takeovers and all the digital sites in just 7 days, covering all four corners of the UK. And it really was quite incredible what we managed to achieve. And that was sort of the first week. But since then, I should say, at that time, there were several other publications that had never even done a cover up. And you think how long it would take to get all those sorts of approvals. But everybody really came together. After that, it was all a bit full on. We then recruited a team of about 35 actually, I think it is, from across the industry, from all the different titles. And we call that Team Nation. And together with Omnigov, the government's media buying agency, and the Cabinet Office, over the last 18 months, we've delivered 70 briefs. So definitely the news industry's largest ever collaboration. And also, I think importantly, it's not just national titles. Obviously, I said 600, but it's regional, local, and also community titles. The other thing to bear in mind, but this was all happening when we were all working from home. We hadn't even got people's numbers to get hold of them. Everybody was working from home. And to this day, we haven't met as a team. I think that's one of the things that I find fascinating. When I'd have been working agency side, if we were answering a client brief, we'd have said, we've all got to be together. We've all got to sit together. It will never work. And you get this cross-publisher team that for the last 18 months have delivered this content, I say week in, week out, but all delivered it all virtually.
Amazing. And the thought process, in terms of this industry-wide collaboration, had it ever happened before, or was this literally the first time?
I mean, we've collaborated on things before, things like audience measurement, and maybe on some campaigns, but definitely not to the scale of that. I mean, without a doubt, unprecedented. Let's say 600 titles delivering at the peak weekly content. So no, it's something I'm immensely proud of. And I also think it's shown us at Newsworks, but also the industry as a whole, that almost like no challenge is too big now. If we can deliver that level of campaign, then we can do anything. So, for any agencies or clients that want to work in that way, we can provide this sort of single access point to the industry, which I think that's one of the other things. Sometimes we're told, but you're not easy to work with. And I hope what this has really demonstrated is that we are easy to work with in terms of that single point of contact with the whole industry behind us.
Now, can you remember, who or when it was first suggested to do a complete, industry-wide campaign? Because as you say, there've been collaboration of a sorts, but, from that to everybody being involved is a huge step.
I can remember it very clearly. It was last Easter. It was actually Easter weekend. And we were approached by the Cabinet Office, as I say, to say, the question they said is, can you come together as an industry to deliver this vital information to the UK population? And we said yes, and then figured out how we were going to do it. So I say that first cover up was a bit of a scramble, but then once we got the team and the platform to communicate and the processes in place, it's become a really finely run machine now. 18 months on, we've learnt a lot. How we've worked evolved. And as I say, I keep saying this, but I'm really proud of what we have achieved as an industry, and makes me very excited about what we can achieve going forward.
Well, it sounds like a real buzz. I mean, it must have
Absolutely.
been an amazing 10 days.
I mean, just talking about it now, and I did another interview last week, and as soon as I start talking about it, that whole excitement and adrenaline comes back. But yeah, that Easter weekend, that next week, as I say, it's 7 days from being briefed to cover wrapping 620 papers and the homepage takeovers as well. A lot of hours were put into that 7 days, sure. I can tell you.
I'm sure. And in terms of going forward, I mean, I'm trying to imagine a time when the pandemic is completely over, hopefully sooner rather than later. But do you think will Team Nation still exist, in an era where there is no COVID?
I really hope so. I mean, this what I think the Cabinet Office will have seen is that it works, this way of communicating. So there's obviously display advertising, but the beauty of having the sponsored content as well is it enables the different news brands to go into more detail, to explain, as I say, in their unique tone of voice, so that we get a response from the readers. So one thing we are seeing, I can't share any of the actual data, but I can say that over the 18 months, there's absolutely no sign of fatigue when it comes to things like awareness of the activity or understanding of the content. So I hope if they're listening in, that they would agree that it really has proved to be a vital campaign for them.
And going forward, obviously you're always looking for new revenue opportunities. Do you think this will, in very monetary terms, this will mean more money for news brands going forward?
I really hope so, James. I mean, when we talk to agencies and advertisers about the importance of journalism, we talk about not just to society and readers, but also to their brands. And I mentioned before about the Peter Field research, and that sort of shows how advertising in news brands can add to their bottom line and to their brand growth. So I really hope that advertisers are starting to see much more positive and longer term business effects when they do invest in news brands. And we've actually got some other research coming up, which is launching at the end of October. And that underscores the effectiveness that news brands have on advertisers' bottom line. And what it'll do is it'll show the brands and the categories that are and aren't optimizing investment in news brands. So basically it will show who could unlock more profit by using news brands. So we're just going through that analysis at the moment, but looking to launch that. I think it's the 20th of October.
Okay, exciting. Now, another campaign you've run, probably last year now, was Back, Don't Block. And I believe that was addressed at the problem of keyword block lists. And you were specifically looking to get the word coronavirus taken off them for very obvious reasons, I suppose. Was the campaign successful? And what's the current state of play regarding these block lists?
Yeah, I mean, I think the campaign certainly brought an issue that was down in the sort of, for want of better terms, the programmatic weeds to the forefront at a time when, if you think back to last April, I mean, and not so much now, but for a long time since last April, there wasn't much else being written about in the news apart from coronavirus. And at the same time, a lot of advertisers, some unknowingly, were being blocked from appearing in this content. So if we take that a stage further, the brands that wanted to advertise in news media, but they were being blocked from advertising where the readers were reading. So where they were reading about coronavirus, which seems madness really. But we've had massive support from the industry, from media agencies and advertisers. And what we were trying to do, we don't want to say anybody was doing anything wrong. What we were trying to do is just raising awareness of block lists and getting clients and agencies to check what's on their block lists, because a lot of them perhaps weren't aware. Although block lists are there for very good reason, brand safety as the main one, but they're a blunt tool, and unwittingly also from a Newsworks and news industry point of view, that's defunding trusted news brands if they're not updated and checked regularly. So if I've got an ongoing appeal in terms of the Back Don't Block, it will be just to keep checking the block lists for what's on them. And so the reason for doing that is to ensure that brands that are advertising in news brands are advertising where readers are reading.
And do you have any idea of the revenue hit that publishers, to their bottom line from incorrect use? I say incorrect use, but using this blunt tool of block lists.
I don't, I'm afraid. As I say, this was more of it. Yes, it probably will have done, but we were more point of it coming from the point of view of the advertisers wanting to be where readers were reading. So it was more, there would have been revenue that was lost. I don't have a figure for that, but it was what we were trying to do was just increase awareness of, just have a look what's on your block list. Do you want all of those words to be on there? Do you want to be blocked from advertising around that content?
And do you try to get an exemption from news brands from block lists? Could trusted news brands be excluded from the block lists altogether?
No, I mean,
from the block list being applied to them.
I think, as I mentioned, block lists are there for very good reason from a brand safety point of view. It's just a case of looking at what's on those lists and double checking. So again, using that coronavirus example, when there was very little else in the news last April, it must have been difficult to find anywhere to advertise if you'd got coronavirus on your block list.
Now, in terms of unlocking more revenue opportunities for news media, which is obviously something high, up your priority list, where do you see the main opportunities in the next few years?
I mean, I think it's a bit the point that I've already sort of mentioned to you about is where the Peter Field research, we looked at where advertisers advertise within news brands, how they have more positive and longer term growth. But that point that I made as well about our news research that's coming up, which looks at where they're underinvesting. So I think those sort of messages, so we keep renewing the work that we do. The research that we've got coming up, I think we analysed, I mean, it's something like, I want to say a thousand different campaigns. I might have got that figure wrong, but we looked at lots of campaigns to look at who's under investing and optimising their investment. So, whilst we talk about because journalism matters, proving ad effectiveness still remains part of our narrative as we go out talking to clients and agencies.
Now, when you create these pieces of research, who are your target audiences? I mean, who, when you put these out, who do you head to first to talk to?
Media agencies in the main. So we see them very much as partners. So they're our first audience. And then there's some clients that we have sort of direct relationships with, but we tend to work with it. We'd go to the agency first and then with them go and talk to clients. It's just about making sure that everybody's aware of the role that news brands can play. And going back to one of your earlier questions about the sort of the importance of trust and that unique relationship that publishers have with their readers.
Now, diversity and inclusion have been hot topics for obvious reasons over the past 18 months. Why do you think it's so important for newsrooms to better reflect society?
I think it's incredibly important to have greater diversity in the newsroom. Well, not just newsrooms, any room or any business. It's really important if you're going to connect with communities and customers that you speak in their language and that you understand what they're saying. So, whether you're reporting on stories or working on a new ad campaign, the only way you're going to do it is if you talk their language. So I think it's probably as simple as that. We need to definitely be more representative of, we need to ensure that the news industry is more representative of its readers and, ensure that there's a commitment to genuine change. And I think we've seen a lot of work in this space across our stakeholders, but also an acknowledgement that whilst progress has been made, there's a lot more that can be done. And I think I'd say that everybody in the industry is much more aware of the benefits of it and the real benefits that greater diversity can bring.
So, but in terms of when you say more could be done, in terms of practical steps and initiatives, is there anything you'd like to see publishers do more of in this area?
Well, I think they're starting. So, we've some of the publishers are hiring people sort of as trainees from lots of different backgrounds. Like there's an ex-supermarket worker, an ex-makeup artist. There's other titles that have launched apprenticeship schemes for school and college leavers, to attract those who would normally face or potentially face barriers to entry. I'm trying to think of some other examples. There's some that are offering bursaries to study journalism. So yeah, I think, and others have recruited people to specifically look at diversity and inclusivity in their businesses. So I think there's been quite a few things that have happened over the last year, and I'm sure they'll continue to do even more.
And how do you see news brands and news media evolving over the next few years? Obviously, it's a period of huge change. I mean, we've been saying that for decades, I suppose, but where do you think future change will come from?
Yeah, I guess in terms of how will news brands evolve, I mean, innovation's a bit of a sort of overused word, but I think they'll continue to innovate in the way that they can deliver journalism, to make sure that they continue to be relevant, to set the agenda, to represent, and to also to be there for their readers. So yeah, I think, I mean, if I look at the Newsworks stakeholders, there's a lot of different business models across those publishers, and they've all got different strategies for their different businesses, and they are innovating in different ways. But what they've all probably got, well, I'm sure, what they've all got in common is that they're future focused and they have a real commitment to produce trusted journalism for all audiences. And I really hope that because of that, that the sentiment across the ad industry is moving as well to where they are starting to understand or re-understand the importance of quality, trusted environments, and where there's trust, as we started off this conversation, but where there's trust and there's a deep relationship between readers, then there's a real benefit for advertisers to work with us.
Now, with the advertising community, the brands who advertise it in news media, you're obviously having success with a good number of the ones who are resistant to your messages. what's the issue? What's the challenge there?
With who? So with the agencies?
Well, with commercial partners who, let's say, have reduced over the years their spend with news brands and are putting it elsewhere. What are the challenges with them? Is it just literally a question of continuing to repeat the message, or have you got particular strategies for those harder to reach groups?
I think probably one of the biggest challenges that we've got, something we're very conscious of, is the need to shift perceptions amongst younger media planners. These are the ones that control the advertising pounds, and that perhaps don't see us as modern or as effective or relevant. And what we need to do is a lot of work on convincing them that they should include us on their plans more often and more frequently at a scale that will benefit their clients. So I think, younger audiences and younger planners specifically are probably our greatest challenges that we need to tackle.
Any particular ideas for unlocking that?
We've actually got a big session planned next week where we're bringing together a team from across the industry to look at how we can do that as an industry. Because I think the more that we can collaborate, the best opportunities are going to come for us if we can collaborate rather than doing individual publisher initiatives. So again, that's something that we're very conscious of. And I think probably the other thing is that there's this feeling that we're not always easy to do business with. And as we've mentioned, the All Together campaign, the government press partnership, that has shown that hopefully that we can be easy to do business with. But I think there's probably other areas that we need to do work on just to convince them that we are easy to do business with.
And what do you think news media in general can learn from the success of the big tech platforms?
Well, I think exactly what we've just said. One thing that we hear an awful lot is about how easy they are to work with, how easy it is to plan and buy. And in comparison, the news industry isn't seen as easy as those platforms to do business with. So we need to replicate that. Yes, we are more joined up as an industry, but there is more that we can do on that whole area of being easier to do business with. So that's probably the biggest thing that we get thrown back when compared to the success of the big tech platforms.
And when you say more, anything in particular? I mean, obviously the Ozone project has been very successful. Are there other areas and other initiatives which you would like to see pursued?
I think audience measurement is something that we've collaborated on in the past, but there's more that we can do there. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned Ozone. They're a great team. They've had some great success over the last year. They're expanding, but obviously I can't really answer for them. I think there's quite a few examples of where we are seeing collaboration. And I think that is going to be the sort of secret to our success is making sure that we continue to do that. And this area of being easier to do business with. And the government campaign is very close to my heart. And the example that I think of when I think of proving just how easy we can be to work with. So getting that message out more, perhaps getting more examples of that and sharing the news.
And with the government campaign, the Team Nation, is that a replicable model for the more commercial side?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we can deliver a campaign of that scale week in, week out, then anything between, especially if we take the other extreme, where an agency is going to each individual title, and then you've got the government campaign at the other end, where it's one sort of point of contact with the industry behind. Anything between the two is possible. We're up for any challenges or any briefs that other clients or agencies want to work in this way. Now we're up and running and have been for the last 18 months. It would be very easy for us to replicate that. And speaking on behalf of the publishers, I know that they're very much up for doing it as well. And in addition to bringing much needed revenue into the market at a time over the pandemic when everything was at a standstill, it's also been a real benefit for the individual publisher teams, for them to work on a cross-industry initiative like that. So I think the people development, team development has been significant as well.
And do you see evidence of demand from agencies for adopting an industry-wide approach for their commercial partners?
Yeah, we're having We're having conversations with a few at the moment, sort of sharing the case study of what we've done. Because I think often with these things, you can go out and say, this is what we could do. And everybody's a bit, could you though? Could you really do that? Perhaps a bit how the government were when they first sort of challenged us. But we have proof now that, I keep saying this, but we've, sorry for the repetition, but we've delivered it week in, week out for 18 months. We can do it. So I think the idea of having a single point of contact is absolutely right. And obviously it doesn't have to be all of the titles. But what we say to agencies is just talk to us, give us your challenges, and we can work with you on a solution. And as I've mentioned, this was a massive news industry collaboration, but it was also the media agency and the client. So very much a sort of three-pronged team that worked on that campaign, or work on that campaign. We're still working on it now.
And in terms, I think you might have answered this in a number of ways, but the greatest challenge and opportunity for news media over the next couple of years, could you just summarise, the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity?
Yeah, I think I would say the biggest challenge for us at Newsworks is this shifting perceptions of our industry. So convincing young media planners that we're not only relevant, but that we are effective and trusted, and that we've got the scale. 36, I think at the last count, 36 million people read a news brand. So just making sure that they're aware of that, so that we feature on their plans. So I think, the biggest sort of challenge or opportunity, whichever way you look at it, is to shift those perceptions.
And you've mentioned a few research projects and discussions, happening at Newsworks at the moment. My next question was going to be what's in the pipeline, but I think you might have given us a bit of a preview already. But what are the things, any big announcements or any big plans which you can, coming up at Newsworks in the next, 6 months or so?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I'm sure there's a lot of people feeling this, but I'm loving being away from my house, away from a screen, and being out and about talking to clients and agencies again. But it's also important that we spend time as a team. So I'm really looking forward to getting the team back into the office properly. We've started coming in a day or two a week, and it's just brilliant all being together and being able to build off each other and just seeing people and being able to share ideas. So I think that's a big thing for me, that I'm definitely looking forward to that. As I've mentioned, we've got the new research coming, which we're calling the bottom line. So that's very much aimed at advertisers and how we can help them grow. We are talking to women in journalism and supporting them on one of their up-and-coming projects. And also we're part of an industry-wide team looking at climate via the Ad Association. And the other thing, working with the NMA on their Journalism Matters Week. So there's quite a lot there. But other than that, I think the other thing is putting the finishing touches to our plans for next year, which in fact, that's what I will be doing after the end of this session. So that's we've got a team session looking at our plans for 2022.
Sounds very exciting. And is Newsworks now a hybrid office, or is everyone going to come back full time? Or
yeah, we're a small team. There's only 9 of us, but I think because we're a small team, it's important that we do come in together. So I think some of the bigger companies obviously finding it difficult to get everybody back at the same time from a sort of a fitting everybody in the office point of view. I think for us, because we're a small team, it's the opposite. It's important that we do come in together. But obviously we need to be out talking to agencies and spending time with our stakeholders as well. So yeah, I think very much a hybrid. One of the things that I've been advocating is that when we're in the office, I want us to spend as much time as we can together, so either one-to-one or as a team, and to try and keep the never-ending video calls for the days that we're at home by ourselves, because it is a small office. It's also not very conducive to us all sitting next to each other, shouting at our screens. So I think hybrid, but hybrid from the point of view of all in a couple of days a week, and then all working from home or out meeting people the other days.
And finally, Jo, a question we ask all our guests on the podcast: outside of work, how do you relax?
Well, I've got 3 children, 3 girls, three teenagers. So
that's not relaxing at all.
Yeah, their social lives and hobbies keep me busy. Although I have to say, as they're getting older, and over the last year, I've sort of felt that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm hoping that I might get some me time back. On top of that, what do? I love a good serial drama, and like a lot of people, I've watched an awful lot of telly over the last 18 months. I've missed going to the theatre though, and I'm catching up on that at the moment. So various performances that I was going to were cancelled. Again, have sort of just all come through. So at one point, I felt like I was going most weeks. So I'm catching up on that. And then something else that I've been doing a lot of over lockdown is walking. I I guess I started doing it when that was the only thing we could do. But I've carried it on, and I've found it's a really good way to either go by myself and clear my head, or to catch up with friends whilst getting exercise and fresh air. So yeah, times have changed, but I'm also glad that pubs and restaurants are open, so I haven't completely changed.
And on TV dramas, any over the last 12 months which you've particularly enjoyed?
Well, the latest one that I'm watching Money Heist. I don't know whether you've seen that.
I think I've heard of it. I haven't seen it. Do you recommend it?
I'd recommend that, definitely. And there seem to be quite a lot on at the moment. I'm sort of having to juggle it. My eldest daughter's away at uni, and the middle one and I tend to watch those 9 o'clock slots. But we're binge watchers, so we have to sort out our watching to make sure we can watch them as quickly as possible. We can't be doing this waiting every week.
All right. Jo Allan, thank you very much for being our guest on the In Publishing podcast.
James, thanks very much for having me.
A final word from our valued podcast sponsor. Air Business is trusted by 4,000 publications and 3 million happy subscribers, with 10 million customer records on file. It processes £500 million each year in 22 currencies and delivers over 300 million items. Find out more at airbusiness.com. Many thanks to Jo for being our guest this time. For me, the key takeaways were the need for greater cross-publisher collaboration to improve ease of purchase, extend media literacy, promote the value of news media to commercial partners, and create more effective messaging to youthful media buyers. You can find out more about Newsworks' activities on their website, newsworks.org.uk. To find out more about us, to register for our newsletter or magazine, or simply to listen to previous podcasts, go to inpublishing.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and do join me in 2 weeks' time for another podcast. Bye for now.